So welcome everybody. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our first ever virtual meditation on the lawn webinar, sponsored by the Contemplative Sciences Center and our partners Who's Well, the Faculty Employee Assistant Program, UVA Athletics, Compassionate Care Initiative, UVA Sustainability, and Mind and Body at UVA. My name is Leslie Hubbard, and I'm the Program Director for Student Engagement at the Contemplative Sciences Center, and I will be your host for today's event. Now, it is a great honor to turn the floor over to our first speaker, David Germano, the Executive Director of the Contemplative Sciences Center.
I want to express my gratitude to Leslie, to our amazing students, Gibson, Kat, Alex, and Leah for being the driving force, to Sam and Jonathan for offering contemplative guidance, and to all the others who've made this gathering possible. I'd like to briefly contextualize today's meditation in relationship to the Student Flourishing Initiative, which is work underway here on grounds and in evolving partnerships across the world with other like-minded universities. This initiative is rooted in the belief that educational systems from preschool through undergraduate, graduate, and professional schools should be first and foremost dedicated to the flourishing of students, and thus the flourishing of the worlds in which we live. Now, it may seem odd to talk about flourishing in these times. It's easy to speak of flourishing in good times, when vast blue skies above us are clear, when we're in the flush of good health, when our families are happy, our careers thriving, our economies expanding. But it's harder when the times are dark, when loved ones and our bodies are at risk, when livelihoods vanish without warning, and when we find ourselves suddenly, now in rather dark times, dominated by illness and death and isolation and anxiety about a deeply problematic present and even more problematic future. So we might think that suffering is a more appropriate topic, and it's hardly as if these crises are new: climate change, social inequity, degradation of well-being amongst our youth. But flourishing is not the opposite of suffering, as if suffering could be completely eradicated. Rather, flourishing embodies the capacity to resiliently navigate the large and small vicissitudes of our existence, to maintain our balance, to actualize our potentials, to align our activities with our values, and to foster well-being. It involves the art of practicing well-being day after day in our bodies, our minds, our emotions, our relationships, in our personal, professional, and communal lives. Because flourishing is never just individual, but must extend into our social lives and restoration of our natural worlds. And so these practices of well-being are individual, and they're also collective. They might involve formal practices, such as we'll experiment with today, like meditation or yoga or prayer, or they might involve adopting a disposition towards self and others in life, whether it's appreciation or a growth mindset or compassion. Or they might be a variety of practices, from jogging or wilderness exploration or deep conversations or the arts. But the art of such practices involves allowing quiet and space in our lives for becoming critically aware of the practices in which we engage and the outcomes that they create and sustain. And also space for considering and fostering new practices when they're called for, to help usher in the self and life and community to which we aspire. So in general, it's the art of living, and the deeply intertwined and distributed nature of ourselves and worlds means that such an art must be collaborative, even when at times it is deeply individual. And so we are joining today for a small interlude between 1 hour and the next on this virtual lawn, a contemplative moment to pause, to connect to ourselves and each other, to reflect in ways that we hope gestures towards this larger aspiration for flourishing in our world.
Thank you so much, David Germano. Now, for a little bit more information on how this whole event began, I would like to turn to our second-year undergraduate student, Gibson Hilton, who had contacted the Contemplative Sciences Center a year ago with this beautiful vision of bringing together the UVA community on the lawn for an afternoon of meditation and contemplation. Gibson, first, thank you so much for not only being a brilliant visionary, but for also embodying one of the core values of UVA, which is student leadership and self-governance. can you tell us a little bit more about your original vision to gather the UVA community on the lawn to practice meditation more than a year ago?
Yeah, totally. And thank you so much for making the vision happen and being so helpful to make it happen. So about a year and a half ago, I had started meditating. Basically, I just heard that it's something that's good to do for your overall well-being. So I was like, this seems worth trying out. And I got into it. I started spending more time meditating. And as time went on, I sort of noticed that I had like a greater sense of receptiveness and sincere gratitude just for the miracle of life. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I want more people to know about this. I'm growing so much from this. So I got to thinking, and I was like, well, people come together for sporting events. People come together to celebrate. Like, I wonder if people would come together to meditate and to sincerely look at how amazing it is just to be here. So I reached out to the Contemplative Sciences Center, and you, Leslie, responded to my email. And last semester, we were able to put together, with the help of some of my friends, an amazing meditation on the lawn. And this semester, I met Leah and Kat and Alex, and they were all interested in making this happen again. And so, yeah, here we are. Thank you all for being here and making this vision real. So it's awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Gibson, and how wonderful it is that we can now expand our original vision of gathering the UVA community and the local community on the lawn to now include members of our global community all around the world. It's so inspiring to know from so many countries today, people are joining us for this event. So we never imagined that could be possible a year ago. So Gibson, as you mentioned, you formed a committee of fellow students to help manifest your vision. And I would like to now turn to Alex. Alex, can you share with us how long you've been meditating and what got you interested in helping out with this event?
Yeah, of course. So I'm actually pretty new to meditating. I started this year by taking Professor Maxwell's course along with Gibson, Kat, and Leah. So yeah, I'm relatively new to this.
That's wonderful. And what made you interested in getting involved with this event?
Yeah, so definitely what Gibson's vision from organizing this last year, and especially because like every class period we basically meditate during our common class. So I was looking forward to do this as a big community with all UVA students and worldwide people just like today.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Alex, for being a part of this committee. And Leah, you're also part of the same committee. Can you share with us why meditation is important to you as a UVA student?
Yeah, I think what has really just hooked me on meditating is that I always leave meditations feeling a lot clearer and lighter than when I go into them. And it just kind of has given me a bird's eye view of what's running through the back of my mind, which isn't always something that we notice as busy UVA students. So I think it's really important in that regard. And then it also just helps me become a lot calmer and be more present and grounded and see things from other people's perspectives as well.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. And now I would like to turn to Kat, who is also a member of the same committee that has made it possible today for us to have this event. So Kat, it's my understanding that we have some beginners joining us today who are interested in starting a meditation practice. And as a relative new practitioner yourself, can you share with us some advice for those of us who are new to practice, especially during these crazy times? I mean, for students, you're in the middle of final exams. And on top of that, as a world, we're facing so much uncertainty due to this pandemic.
Yeah, sure. So I would say that the key to meditation is definitely consistency. Commit to yourself, commit to finding 15 to 20 minutes every day that you can just sit down and meditate. In the beginning of your journey, you don't really need to worry about perfecting your meditation techniques. As long as you practice consistently, the benefits will naturally come. And I know that many people start off really excited by the idea of meditating, but then find themselves slipping after a few days or weeks. So I challenge all of the beginners joining us today to fully commit to meditation when you're ready and make it a part of your daily life, because I know you will not regret it.
Well, thank you so much, Kat, for those words of wisdom. So thank you, Gibson, Kat, Alex, and Leah, for making this event possible and for sharing all of your advice and wisdom to our beginners. And so speaking of meditation, it is now a great pleasure to introduce to you Sam Greene, who will be leading us through a guided meditation right now.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you to the students for organizing this and for inviting me to be here. I'm really happy to be doing this. There are some experienced meditators in this group today, and there are some people who have little or no meditation experience. So for those of you who are new to the practice, I want to briefly discuss some basics. Meditation is one form of contemplative practice, one form of mindfulness practice. Mindfulness is really just calling your attention fully and non-judgmentally to what is happening in the present moment. And when you do that, even briefly, it can be very relaxing. However, it's easier said than done. And that's because we usually pay attention to the constant stream of thoughts that's running through our heads. And that's a step or two removed from our actual experience. Now, you can't force the mind to stop thinking. In fact, the harder you try not to think, the busier your mind will get. But the moment you notice that you are thinking, you have a choice. You can pursue the thought, or you can notice that it's there, let it go, and call attention back to what is present. Now, operationally, the simplest way to do that is to call attention to sensations in the body, which really only occur in the present moment. In sitting meditation, the sensations of the breath are commonly used as an object of awareness. You will see that as you start to observe the sensations of the breath, the mind quickly takes over and you find that you're paying attention to thinking again. Maybe the most important thing to understand about meditation is that thinking during meditation is not a failure. Thinking is normal, right? Every time you notice that you're thinking and let it go, that's success, right? It doesn't matter how quickly your attention wanders off or how often or how long it's gone before you notice. All that matters is that whenever you do notice that your attention is elsewhere, you patiently and gently call yourself back and reconnect to the breath, right? So the instruction you can't follow is don't think. The instruction you can follow is whenever you notice thinking, just let it go and reconnect with your breath. And as a consequence of following that instruction over and over and over and over, gradually the mind can settle down on its own. So I will provide frequent guidance during the meditation for the beginners to keep calling you back. And I'll suggest a couple of tools that you can try using to help settle your attention. The key through all of this is patience. Just keep coming back and starting over. Now, for those of you who are experienced meditators, here's a heads up. I will be speaking frequently during the meditation for the benefit of the beginners. So you have a choice about what to do with those sounds, right? You can treat my voice like any other sound that arises during meditation and simply let it pass right through you. Or you can practice beginner's mind and find out what these instructions do for you today, all right? You may have heard these beginner's instructions many times before, but you are different than you were the last time you heard them. And the more fully you pay attention, the more you will see that that's true. So in order to prepare, find a sitting posture that is reasonably upright and relaxed. And it will help to minimize distractions, to close your eyes. Right? What we see is very distracting to the mind. So if you just allow your eyes to close and begin by bringing attention to the sensations of sitting, right? And seeing if you can be very specific about the sensations that are present right now, sitting just this way. Noticing sensations of pressure where the feet are on the floor, where the body is in contact with the seat. wherever the hands are resting. Sensations of clothing on the skin, temperature, maybe air currents. Sensing the whole body sitting. And taking a moment to see if there's any tension or tightness in the body that can be released. Softening the face, especially around the eyes and the forehead. Relaxing the jaw. Relaxing the shoulders. Softening the belly. And as the body settles, noticing that there's still a little movement as the breath comes and goes on its own. It can help to pick one spot. Maybe you notice the air moving in the nostrils, or a tingling in the throat, or a movement in the chest or the belly. Whichever sensation is most noticeable right now, letting the attention settle on that spot and noticing all of the different sensations of each in-breath and all of the sensations of each out-breath. Maybe the breath is deep or shallow, regular or irregular. No need to change it or control it. Just observing how the body is breathing right now. And whenever you notice that you have lost track of the breath, coming back patiently and starting again. Noticing the rhythm of the breath. Maybe the in-breath and out-breath are the same. Maybe one is a little bit longer than the other. Noticing the moment of stillness at the end of each in-breath and the end of each out-breath. A brief pause as it turns around. If the mind is very busy, it may help to count a few out-breaths, counting right at the end, at that moment of stillness. And now noticing this breath. If the mind is tight, if you feel like this is work, bringing some attention to softening the face, especially around the brow. And when you feel that the face is very soft, coming back to the breath. And now noticing this breath. If you feel that you are controlling the breath, perhaps letting it stop for a moment at the end of the out-breath and watching the urge to breathe arise on its own. And coming back patiently and starting again. And now this breath. And now expanding your awareness to include the sensations of sitting and breathing. Sensing the whole body breathing. Aware of all of the sensations of touch in the body, including the breath. And now drawing your attention outward to your surroundings. And when you're ready, opening your eyes.
Thank you so much, Sam, for that thoughtful guided meditation and allowing us to come together today to enjoy the peace of a contemplative pause on this beautiful virtual lawn. And for those of you who have questions or comments about your experience just now in meditation or meditation in general, please at any point share those questions in the Q&A box, and in a few minutes we will start to transition to our live Q&A session. And so whether we are new to meditation or we are experienced practitioners, we're often faced with the very real challenge of how to bring these tools into our daily lives that we just practice with, such as beginning to still our wild and crazy minds, being present non-judgmentally with our own experience, and creating that intentional gap or space between a stimulus or trigger in our life and our reaction to it. And there are many diverse ways, as David Germano had shared earlier, in which we can practice these types of tools in our daily life. And here with us today, we have UVA head wrestling coach Steve Garland and UVA Health Systems palliative care liaison nurse Jonathan Bartels to share with us some practical tips on how we can continue to be resilient and focused and present for our needs and others as a habit in our daily life. So I'd like to turn now to Coach Garland, and can you share with us some words of wisdom and strategies that you use with your student athletes at UVA and things you practice yourself to stay focused and present and resilient in your daily life, especially during these challenging times that we face today with the pandemic?
Well, sure, I can sure try. And I think I would be very careful using the word wisdom, but I can hopefully just give you guys some practical, simple advice. And that's my preface to everything, is that nothing's going to be earth shattering, but hopefully things that I've experienced. And I'll start from scratch. Again, my name is Steve Garland, and I'm a proud alumnus of this great university. And I've been a wrestling coach at the Division I level for the past 20 years. 6 years at Cornell University and 14 years here now at the University of Virginia as the head coach here of our wrestling program. And when you add on to that, the 5 years I spent competing in college wrestling myself, I can say confidently that I've seen my fair share of stressful situations. I think it was David who mentioned the word suffering. Well, in a lot of ways, we actually manufacture suffering in my world. That's actually part of my job, is to create adversity and manufacture adversity in a controlled environment. So whether it be myself specifically, personally experience adversity, or helping one of my athletes through dealing with the stresses of their world, I've experienced things like struggles with fear, competition anxiety, serious injuries, heartbreaking losses, the death of close friends and teammates, and the deaths of some of the young men that I've actually coached personally. Helping men work through damaged relationships. Me personally experienced damage in relationships in the workplace. Me personally experiencing the financial burdens that come with the life of a wrestling coach. The strain of this job on my family, my wife and 2 children. And constantly, and I do mean constantly, having to experience, fight through, and learn from failure. Failure is a big part of athletics. It's a big part of what we do. And so again, I know a little bit about tough times, and we are all experiencing tough times right now. There are people all over the world facing physical, financial, and emotional challenges that they never signed up for. My heart truly goes out to them, and it goes out to you today, the listeners, the participants in this event. And if you're struggling today, if you're burdened, if you're heavy laden, if you feel overwhelmed, this message is for you. And I truly hope that I can be some help this morning in helping you, again, with those tools and the practical advice I give you. And so the segue here really, and what my mission is at its core at UVA, is to help my guys do a couple things, 3 things. 1, identify their goals. 2, help set a specific plan in place to reach those goals. And 3, hold them accountable to sticking to that plan. And that's essentially what I do. What I'd like to do today is help with a very simple plan that will hopefully give you some helpful tools. And how I refer to this 5-step plan is just with an acronym, a simple acronym called TACOS. TACOS, tacos. I hope that's pretty simple, and hope it's pretty easy to remember. So the T stands for Thanksgiving, the A stands for acknowledgement, the C stands for commitment, the O stands for others, and the S stands for self. So let's start with the T, Thanksgiving. I believe that a heart of gratitude fuels everything good. Constantly stressing this with our athletes, that a heart of gratitude fuels everything good. And how can we be intentional about developing a heart of gratitude? Well, I recommend to start every day literally writing down 3 to 5 things you're grateful for. And if there's more things you're grateful for, then write that down. Write as many as you can. Literally start the day, have a journal next to your bed, something to write with, get up and start with that. Before your feet hit the carpet, you write down those things that you're thankful for that day as you get up and face the day. Personally, I have to start every day like this. I have to start every day with that type of train of thought. And this is a skill. I really believe that the gratitude is a skill that can be developed just like anything else, and especially worked on and honed and fine-tuned in times of trial. And you want to be intentional about this. And this is kind of the foundation for everything else I'm going to say today. And it leads to my next letter in the acronym A, acknowledgement. And very similar to what I just said in terms of gratitude, with all the bad news coming these days, with all the things we're hearing on the news and experiencing in our lives, we need to be intentional, I think, about thinking about acknowledging the positives in our lives, acknowledging the positives in our lives. And that said, this is a big, however, this is the big but. You can't put your head in the sand either. We can't deny the challenges out there. We can't deny what we're up against. We need to be educated and up to speed on what's going on in our world so that we can be wise and make good decisions. However, and this is the big caution, we don't ever need to be obsessed with, or what I call, when I use this word with my athletes all the time, being fixed, being fixated on the problem, whether it be them getting fixated on an outcome, whether it be them being fixated on something they think may happen. We have to get fixed on the process, because when you get fixed on the problem, you get fixed on an outcome. When this happens, anxiety grows, and anxiety is really at its core is a divided mind. What anxiety really means is having a divided mind. If you're going down that road, acknowledge it and do something about it. Acknowledge it. I tell my athletes, it's okay to not be okay. And for you listening today, it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. It's not okay to stay there. And so you can't stay there. You have to do what you have to do to commit to make changes, commit to get a plan in place that's unique to you. And that leads me to the next C, the next word in the acronym C, commitment. You're going to commit to make changes of the mind, changes of the heart, and changes in your actions and your behaviors. The first one, changes in your mind. We commit to changing our perspective. We actually start thinking about how we're thinking about the way we're thinking. We start seeing things different and asking ourselves different questions. For example, in the time we're living in now, instead of asking myself the question, how am I ever going to get through this? How are we ever going to get through this? I start asking myself the question, how am I going to get better through this? Instead of asking the question, when's this going to end? How am I going to be better when it does end? What am I going to actually learn on the backside of this? How am I going to be a different Steve Garland on the backside of this? The second one, commit to opening your heart. You commit to opening your heart to learn the lessons that come through trial, that I frankly believe only can come through trial. I believe adversity is one of the best teaching tools we will ever experience. I talk to my guys constantly about how suffering, adversity, and trial actually shape and mold and form us and conform us. And these are things that can be good things as opposed to bad things. And finally, in our actions, based on those lessons and all that's been revealed through that time of reflection, then we commit to making changes. We actually start to write down and be intentional and get a plan in place for action, for specific action. In my life, for example, one of the things that have come through this, financially, a lot of things had to change with my wife and I financially to support our family and for me to lead my family the right way. Relationally, changes that can be made relationally and also physically. What changes can be made there? So financially, relationally, physically, there's others, but those are just the main points that I was thinking about. And as you see, as you go through this process, you actually end up not just worrying about yourself, but you discover in a much deeper way the needs of those around you. You actually start to develop empathy. And what empathy is defined as the understanding and sharing in the experiences and feelings of another. I'm going to say that again. Empathy is defined as understanding and sharing in the experiences and the feelings of another person, feelings of others. And that leads me to my next letter, O, others. There's no greater fulfillment or purpose and feeling of joy than when we can help another person. It's in this great time of trial that we really need to dig into who we can help and how we can help. I think that's one of the most encouraging things that's come out of the last 6 weeks is seeing all over our community, not just locally, but worldwide, the types of things that have been done to truly just help another person with nothing in return for themselves. And again, I go back to my first statement. I don't think there's any greater fulfillment of purpose and joy than you can experience in your life and peace than when you do something like that for somebody else. I'll say this. I believe in my heart that we all have different gifts and talents that are unique to us. Each and every person listening today, each and every person that I've been called to lead, that they've been gifted in a specific way that's unique to them. And it's up to them to be a good steward of that gift and to use that gift to help other people. They have to put that gift into practice. One practical example of that is my wife I believe this is a gift. She's a phenomenal listener. I'm not a great listener. I've actually been on the road fundraising a lot over the last 20 years. And I'll say a lot of the men that I've dealt with aren't good listeners. The wrestlers I've coached, a lot of them aren't good listeners, but my wife is. And so she's utilizing that gift. She's actually created a list of people she can invest in each week, people that are struggling, people that need her. She calls them up and she listens. She uses that gift, and she's helping people week in and week out by using that simple gift. And finally, this leads us to our last letter in the acronym S, which is self. And certainly last but not least, you do have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure your cup is full. And there's a lot of ways to do this, and some have been mentioned already in this event. But I would say this, for me personally, I have to be intentional about exercise. It has to happen. If it doesn't happen, I'm a grumpy Gus. I'm not a great person to be around. So that's something that's built into my day. Also, reading is a big thing for me. Time alone is important for me. I'm a guy that for the last 20 years has had to build into and sacrifice and serve 18 to 22-year-old males. That's an interesting group of humans to lead, trust me. And so there's times that I need my me time. And one of the great blessings is to come out of this stressful situation that I've had time for that. This is the first time in 20 years that I haven't had to travel every weekend. This time of year, I'm gone every weekend. Every single weekend, I'm not at home. I've missed anniversaries. I've missed my daughter's birthdays. I've missed a lot of things. And so what this has really helped me to do is channel back into that time back with them and with myself. And so I would just encourage everybody to think about that, how they can pour into themselves and fill their own cup. Lastly, I don't have a great wrap up for this. I'm not a great closer, but I would say this for everybody listening: you're not alone. You're not alone. Please dig into the resources around you and the people that are in your life that can help you. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Coach Garland, for those incredible words of wisdom and practical tools for our community worldwide. We're so grateful to have you here with us today. And again, if anyone has questions for Coach Garland, you can post those in the question and answer session, and we'll be going to that live in a few minutes. And in the same spirit, I'm also thrilled now to turn the floor over to Jonathan Bartels, who has been on the front lines at UVA Health, working to provide resources for well-being for doctors and nurses who are caring for patients suffering from COVID-19. And Jonathan, can you share with us some practices that you use in your work in the hospital that help you and others to be resilient and well, especially during these challenging times?
Sure, I'd love that. Coach Garland, everyone loves tacos, dude. I love that. That's great. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
As a nurse and also part of the Compassionate Care Initiative, we've been doing a lot of resiliency practices for the last 10 years for nurses and physicians, and running retreats for that, which has been really awesome. I've had to take some of those practices and I have to apply them in an environment where things don't slow down, where suffering is an everyday thing. It just is. So I've had to kind of look at what can I bring to my staff and to people both here at UVA and around the world that are going to help them. One of the practices that I developed that became both national and international was the practice called the pause, the medical pause. And what that practice was we would work on patients traditionally and work really hard to save their life, or we might be caring for a patient for a long period of time. And, sometimes the outcomes just don't match what we want them to. And sometimes the outcomes are just going to be the reality that we're going to have. And because of that, I had to try to figure out how can I capture this moment and how can I help heal my staff in a brief way, in sort of an inoculation as opposed to the full treatment. What Sam did, and thank you, Sam, I think that meditation was awesome. He did a long meditation and I had to figure out something short. And so what I did after a particular bad trauma one day, and we were just banging trying to save this patient, at the end of it, normally we would walk away and just throw our gloves off, and we'd walk away. You could see the frustration in the staff. You could see people shattered because they didn't get the outcome they wanted. And people would just turn away from the body and walk away. And what I did was I stopped the room. I said, hey, could we take a moment? And this is where the medical pause came up. And it was after the patient died, I asked, could we stop? And could we just take a moment to honor this patient? Before they came here, they were alive, they were loved, and they were loved and they loved others. They were someone's brother or sister. And could we just honor that and also honor the work that we did, the work we put in to try to help them? And if we could do that in silence and in our own way, just hold that space for 30 seconds to a minute, would that be okay? And my whole room stopped. And we just silently honored that patient. And if you were Muslim, if you were Jew, if you're agnostic, if you're Christian, everyone had their voice because they held that in silence, and they held that to honor that patient. You know, in doing that practice, we also participated. If you think about when someone dies for a family, time stops. And when we stop and pause, we participate in the stopping of time with that family to let them know their loved one counts and their loved one means something. And so it was a compassionate act. And sometimes compassionate acts can help elicit compassion within our own selves. Oftentimes we try to bring compassion to the table, but sometimes you can do acts of compassion that will allow that compassion to be born in you. So that was one of the practices I started. And now it's being done across the United States and on 6 continents around the world. During this pandemic, in New York, in Spain, in Italy, these docs in these hot spots can't stop. But now they are, and they're using this pause, and it's helping them. You know, a New York Times article a couple of weeks ago mentioned that. I was like, that's really cool. It's really cool because it's tested now. It's tested in some of the most difficult areas in the country. The other practice I want to talk about real quick is some of my nurses at UVA didn't sign up to do COVID. And these are young nurses, young men and women. And all of a sudden they went from being, you know, medicine, you know, nurses to then being COVID nurses. And you can imagine you're being told every day to go in with little PPE, little protection, and you've got to take care of these patients. So you're facing your own death, and it's scary. And they called me over to their unit a couple weeks ago when they were making that transition. And what I brought to them was a practice I used in the ER years ago because of the lack of time. I brought them a practice called what I call Guerilla Mindfulness. And it's kind of like guerrilla warfare. You go in, you get in there, pop in and pop out. And so what I do is I went in and we would sit and I'd get nurses and we'd gather and we sat and did a 5-minute meditation. And it was beautiful. And they kept asking for me to come back. And so Friday was my last day to do that for a little while. And hopefully we'll be back in to help them again. But you can imagine what it did for those nurses. It just really, that small inoculation was enough to carry them through that day. So they could come back tomorrow and do the work again. And meditation practice that Sam did and contemplative practices that are promoted are much longer, but the inoculations help too. And so it's been a real honor to help both the community and help people around the world with this stuff. And, you know, thank you for letting me share.
Oh, thank you so much, Jonathan. You are such an inspiring leader in your field, and how amazing is it that people all over the world now are doing the pause in such
Cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. So if anyone has any questions, any further questions for Jonathan or anybody else on our panel, we are now transitioning to the Q&A live session. And we know that some of your questions have already been answered, but if you have a question on your mind, please post it now. I would like to first ask Coach Garland. We have a question for Coach Garland specifically. How did you help your athletes who were denied the culminating experience of their seasons and indeed their careers to process that mourning and turn it into something positive for the rest of their lives?
Yeah, I've been asked that question a lot in the last, 5 weeks. And here's what I did. So I think a lot of times when people are struggling, the worst thing to do is say too much. I think that when people are facing heartbreak, I think when you try to fix it, when you try to say something that you think will fix it, it actually makes it worse. So believe it or not, what I did was I got in the locker room with them. It was a really hard scene. There was a lot of guys really struggling. One of my guys in particular was the number 2 ranked guy in the country and had his career ended right like that. Done. His whole dream of winning a national title that he dreamt about since he was 5 years old was gone. And he's weeping next to me. What I did at that moment was I just got in the pit with him. I think some of the best things you can do for your athletes is not say anything and just get in there and suffer with them. And so I told the guys, I'm not going to say a whole lot. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be hurt. I'm going to hurt with you. I want you guys to know that I love you and I'm here for you. And so we just got in that locker room and I just got in there and hurt and suffered with them. And so for about 10 minutes, we all just sat there as we just talked about. It was a productive pause to not say anything and just be there for each other. And then one of our captains got up and said stuff that I won't repeat. It was pretty personal, and then we just got together as a family. And then from there we moved forward. But in the actual moment, there wasn't a whole lot said. It was more about suffering with the guy. When my guys experience some of their heartbreaks, for example, if I have a guy lose in the All-America round, which is the hardest thing you can do in our sport to go through, you just sit in the hallway as a grown man weeps, and you just sit with him and you put your arm around him and you weep with him. You mourn with those who mourn, and then there's a time to rejoice with those who rejoice. And that's what I did.
Thank you so much, Coach Garland. We're exemplifying those principles of being present and empathetic and compassionate. We now have another question. I would like to turn now to David Germano. The question is, what can someone do when their worry and empathy for others takes over and becomes paralyzing?
So I think in that context, a lot of people will talk about trying compassion meditations out. And compassion meditations are kind of to address those challenges where you're still feeling a resonance and a connection to other people and a care for them. But instead of being overwhelmed by internalizing their perspective and their pain, which can lead to empathetic distress and burnout and so forth, you're moving more towards thinking about action. How can you engage with this person? What are the possibilities that you might be able to offer some kind of assistance or not, but not simply internalize their suffering and become overwhelmed with it. I mean, Jonathan probably has a much more intelligent thing to say on that front, since it's such a pervasive challenge in the healthcare.
Jonathan, would you like to add to that answer?
I think David's spot on. I love well-wishing meditation for just those instances of the metta practice, but it's what Coach Garland said as well. It's the capacity to sit with that and be with that, and not make it change, but just sit with it, is a means to work through something and not necessarily push it down and hide it.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we have another question for you, Jonathan, asking, could you share the specifics of this 5-minute guerrilla mindfulness that you do with the COVID nurses?
Oh, it varies. I don't have a set plan, but if you want me to do the practice, is that something they're asking me to do, or do they just want me to talk about it?
Just a little bit more specifics about it.
Sure. So I get my staff kind of, especially in the ER, I got them used to the bell. And the bell was awesome because I could put that on the loudspeaker. And if the ER was going nuts, when people are just pouring everywhere, I could get on that loudspeaker and bang that bell. And my people that did the 5-minute practices would stop and take a deep breath. The actual Guerilla Mindfulness is a short body scan or a short meditation. And at the end, we really just honor why we're there, and we honor what we're there for, and we honor each other. and it's just 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes of a sitting practice. And when I started in the ER years ago, I usually had like 2 people in a trauma bay, and we would do it when there was some downtime. By the end, before I left the ER, we had up to 15 sitting in a trauma bay, just doing that practice for 5 minutes.
Amazing. Amazing how powerful a 5-minute practice can be.
Yeah.
In a context.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we have a question now for some of our student panelists. And the question is, what is the best way for someone new to meditation to learn more about it and begin practicing? Should it be a daily activity, or what's the best advice you can give them? So Gibson, Alex, Leah, Kat.
For me personally, the way I kind of like started when I didn't really know anything about meditation was I took to YouTube, and there's videos about all sorts of things. Like I would look up like what to do about your feet going numb while meditating, and you just don't do anything for that. I guess it'll be okay. But yeah, there's like so many resources. Like the internet honestly is an amazing place. You need to be like careful, I guess, to make sure that like the sources that you're using are valuable. But also, I mean, meditation is pretty simple. Like you can really just set a timer for 10 minutes on your phone and just sit there in silence and like just be aware of yourself and what's going on. So that's how I got into it. But
thank you, Gibson. Anyone else want to add to that? Leah, Alex, Kat?
Yeah, I mean, so basically how I got into it and kept up with it was just setting up a reminder daily at a specific time. You can either do it in the morning or the evening before going to bed. And then just like after a few weeks, you'll just develop that discipline, and it'll get easier.
That's really great advice, Alex. Thank you. And I would like to turn over now to Sam Greene. Would you like to add anything to that, Sam?
Sure. I think a couple of people have asked, how long should you start? I would say there's no minimum requirement. Most people find that it does take a little time for the mind to settle down. And so if you routinely only practice for 5 minutes, your mind may never really get that quiet. However, practicing for 5 minutes is way better than not practicing at all. And if you do it regularly, it adds up. I think a lot of people would say you start with something like 15 or 20 minutes. That's something that most people can handle on a fairly regular basis. People first starting out, it's very helpful to have some recorded guidance, because it's very hard to stay present for more than a moment or two on your own. But at some point, once you understand the instructions, you're really better off without them. Just use a timer.
That's great advice, Sam. And thank you, Leah, Alex, and Kat also for your responses, and all the panelists who've added their great wisdom to this question and answer panel. We know that we didn't get a chance to answer everybody's questions. And so if you would like your question answered, then you can email us at csc@virginia.edu, and we will get a chance to answer your question after this event. And we're about to wrap up the event, and we have one more really important feature. And I want to talk about this last practice that we want to explore together today. And this is the simple practice of gratitude that's already been mentioned by several of our speakers. And this practice has been the subject of recent research on well-being. And it's the simple practice of recognizing the things that we're grateful for in our life. And this can take a variety of forms. As Coach Garland mentioned, you can keep a daily gratitude journal. You can share words of thanks to others. And we at CSC want to start a little experiment, and we would like to challenge the UVA community, locally and globally, to a 30-day gratitude challenge on social media, which means every day for 30 consecutive days, you join us in posting one thing on social media that you're grateful for using the hashtag Who's Grateful. That's Who's, H-O-O-S, Grateful, and tagging at UVA CSC. And we're also starting this challenge during National Nurses Week. And let's all give a shout out of gratitude to all of the hardworking nurses across the world who are on the front lines right now during this pandemic and saving lives as we speak. So to help kick off this challenge, most appropriate person I can think of is Jonathan. So I now turn the floor over to Jonathan Bartels to tell us a little bit more about how to contemplate on gratitude.
Thank you. My old man told me when I was trying to choose a career to always choose something that that you could do and not get paid for and be happy about it. And I want to, after 22 years of nursing, almost 33 in healthcare, I think that nursing for me has been one of those jobs. I don't want my employers to think you are not going to pay me, but I just want you to know that the joy of giving care to other human beings, we receive more than our patients receive. And if we do it right, we get to go into people's lives and be changed forever. And so in these 22 years as a nurse here at UVA, it's been a real honor both to work with the community, to work with the patients, to sit vigil with patients, to help them through suffering, and to help them through tough decisions, and to help them through some of the hardest parts of their lives. And the joy and the expanse of it for me, I once was quoted as saying, I take care of millionaires and prostitutes, and I give them all the same care. And that's truly, truly what we do. There are no VIPs. Every patient's a VIP. Every patient that comes in that door is a VIP. And I just wanted to really express a short story of gratitude. A young lady last week was taking care of a patient dying of COVID. And the patient was in her room, isolated. Many people are dying alone with COVID these days. They have no family. We can't have them come in. In this particular case, this patient had no family even to come in. And she was lying in her bed, going through the dying process. And I was helping coach the nurse through the care of that patient through medications and what symptoms to treat and how to treat those. And I left the unit and I came back, and that nurse had been sitting in that room with that patient for an hour and a half, sitting by her bedside, holding her hand, and just offering what Coach Garland talks about, that presence, because there are no words. And she sat and did that. And that's happening all over the country. That's happening in hospitals all over the world. And nurses are doing that. And I just want to express my gratitude for the opportunity as a nurse to be able to offer that to other human beings who are suffering.
Jonathan, that's such a deeply inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for your service in your career. And I'm so blessed that you're going to continue for many years this amazing service sharing to the world. I'm so grateful that you're here with us today to kick off this challenge. So to tell you a little bit more about this challenge, you in the next 30 days, hopefully could join us in a consecutive daily post of something that you're grateful for. And again, we're starting off with National Nurses Week. So giving a shout out of gratitude to all those hardworking nurses across the world. And we're using that hashtag Who's Grateful, HOOS, grateful, and tagging at UVA CSC. And we're starting today. So we'll all be posting something later on our own Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook accounts to join everybody in this wonderful challenge. So in the spirit of gratitude, I would like to now thank everybody who has attended today. It is so inspiring to know that we have members of the large UVA community globally joining us from all over the world, India, Taipei, California, Colorado. It's just unbelievable that you made the time to join us today. And each of your presence is such a treasure in our worldwide virtual community. So huge shout out of gratitude. I hope to see you all in future events and virtual classes.